The Galactic Council gathered inside a huge circular chamber that floated above a quiet silver sea on their capital world. Meetings like this happened every cycle, usually slow and dull, filled with reports about trade routes, small border disputes, and routine updates from distant colonies. Most council members expected this day to be exactly the same. None of them imagined that a single mistake, a simple request, would change everything and shake the entire galaxy. A young archivist stood near the center console. He was new, nervous, and eager to prove himself. His job was usually small: clean up old files, mark outdated logs, and fix classification errors. That morning, he noticed something odd in the archive. A planet file was locked with ancient symbols he had never seen before. The lock code didn't match any used by current governments, and the file location wasn't connected to any known star system. At first, he thought it was a glitch, but the file kept flashing orange, almost like it wanted attention. He approached the council speaker and quietly mentioned the strange file. The speaker frowned, motioned the archivist forward, and asked him to explain. The rest of the council listened with mild curiosity. Ancient files sometimes showed up, but they were usually harmless, outdated records, old survey scans, or forgotten maps. The archivist tried to be calm, but his voice shook as he spoke. He said he found a sealed planetary designation that didn't match any catalog. It was placed under the highest level of restriction, higher than war protocols, higher than plague zone quarantine. The symbols on the file didn't exist in the current database. He asked for permission to open the file, thinking it must be a mislabeled world that needed reclassification. The chamber grew quieter. One elder shifted in his seat. Another narrowed his eyes. A third let out a slow breath. Their reactions felt strangely heavy for something that should have been a simple fix. But they didn't say anything, not yet. Finally, the speaker gave a nod. Permission granted. The archivist took a steady breath and stepped toward the console. He placed his hand on the panel. The lights dimmed almost instantly. A soft alarm chirped in the background. Not loud, not dangerous, but unsettling. The council members leaned forward. As the system unlocked, the console projected an old shimmering code that twisted and rearranged itself in the air. The archivist had never seen anything like it. He hesitated, then read the planetary designation aloud, syllable by syllable. The moment the name left his mouth, the chamber reacted as if something alive had woken up. The ceiling lights flickered. The air vibrated like a distant thunderstorm had rolled through the atmosphere. The silver sea outside the windows trembled. Even the energy shields around the building shimmered like ripples in water. A few council members stood up at once, their expressions sharp and alarmed. The archivist stepped back, startled and confused. One of the older council members whispered something under his breath. Another looked like he wanted to shout, but the words didn't come out. They all recognized something the archivist did not. That name should never have been spoken. It was not a glitch. It was not an error. It was a warning label from a time when the galaxy lived under rules, very different from today. The console suddenly released a new wave of glyphs, and the sealed file opened on its own. Streams of data filled the air as holograms. Old footage, ancient reports, strange energy readings, all flashing in chaotic bursts. The council members were tense now, exchanging looks of fear and disbelief. Some stepped closer to the holograms. Others instinctively stepped away. The archivist felt his heart racing. He didn't understand what he had done, but he felt the weight of it. His hands trembled as he asked if he should stop the system. The speaker snapped at him, not in anger, but in panic, telling him not to touch anything. Another alarm sounded, deeper this time, from somewhere outside the building. It was an old emergency tone that none of the newer officials had ever heard before. The few elders in the chamber recognized it immediately. It was the kind of alarm used when an entire civilization had to protect itself from something so unpredictable that no standard defense plan could be trusted. The archivist turned to the speaker and asked why the system was reacting like this. Why would one planet file cause such chaos? Why was everyone suddenly afraid? The speaker hesitated. He looked at the holographic name still floating above the console. He took a slow breath and explained that long ago, before the current council even existed, some planets were sealed away and locked behind ancient protocols. The worlds on that list were not simply dangerous. They were considered unclassifiable, unpredictable, beyond normal rules. Most of these worlds were destroyed or isolated. Their names were never meant to be repeated. But this one was different. This one was marked not for destruction, but for silence. The archivist asked why. Nobody answered. One of the elders finally spoke. His voice was low and tense. He said the file belonged to a planet that old explorers once visited. They thought the world was harmless, just a small blue sphere around a quiet star. But something happened during that encounter, something so severe that the entire galaxy agreed to never speak of that planet again. Its name was sealed away for good reason, he said, and reopening it could trigger deep warning systems buried throughout the Council's infrastructure that the archivist felt cold. He didn't mean to break anything, but it was too late. The name had already been spoken. The file was unlocked. And whatever ancient system monitored, it had already reacted. Another wave of data burst from the holograms, showing symbols that translated into a single message, repeated over and over again. Containment breach. Identity protocol activated. The speaker's expression changed from fear to dread. Containment breach meant the lock placed on the planet wasn't just symbolic. It was part of a galaxy-wide safety mechanism. Identity protocol meant that the act of speaking the planet's true name unlocked a connection. Some sort of ancient link had been re-established. The archivist swallowed hard and asked if that meant the planet could hear them now. No one answered out loud. But the silence said enough. The holograms shifted again, showing brief clips of the old explorers' encounter. The images were blurred and distorted, but the council members saw enough to understand why the elders were terrified. The footage showed humans, strong, adaptable, strange, and far more capable than any early galactic species had predicted. They watched as humans survived impossible situations, invented solutions on the spot, negotiated with a confidence that unsettled their visitors, and displayed an instinctive understanding of tactics that no predictive model could analyze. The clip cut off abruptly, followed by more warning symbols. The archivist stepped back, overwhelmed. He had opened a door that had been locked for ages, and now the council was staring at a truth they had been protected from for generations. A truth that scared even the strongest among them. The speaker declared an immediate emergency session. Guards sealed the chamber. Communications were restricted. The archivist was ordered to stay inside the room, not as punishment, but because nobody knew what would happen next. The entire chamber felt heavy and filled with a strange tension, almost like the air itself was holding its breath. The speaker finally said the words no one wanted to hear. The moment the name was spoken, they may have heard us. And for the first time in many cycles, real fear filled the council chamber. Because if the ancient records were true, and if that world had truly heard its name again, then the galaxy was about to face something it had not faced in a very, very long time. Something human. When the old footage started playing inside the council chamber, everyone went quiet. The images flickered like memories forced awake after a long sleep. The holograms were unstable, shaking slightly, as if even the machines were nervous about showing them again. The archivist watched with wide eyes, while the senior council members stared with a mixture of fear and recognition. The first scene showed a group of early explorers landing on a small blue planet. The skies in the recording were clear, the oceans bright, and the land full of color. At first glance, the world looked peaceful. The explorers in the recording seemed calm as they walked across a field, scanning the environment like it was just another survey job. Nothing in the early footage suggested danger, but the moment they encountered the first humans, everything changed. The hologram zoomed in on a group of people standing near a coastline. They were carrying simple tools, wearing simple clothes, talking in a language the explorers couldn't understand. The explorers stayed at a distance, expecting confusion or fear. Instead, the humans looked directly at them with steady, sharp eyes. The explorers attempted a greeting using a universal translator, but the humans responded with gestures, expressions, and movements that showed something surprising. They were not afraid. A council member muttered under his breath that even back then, humans showed confidence that didn't match their level of technology. Another added that the humans' reactions were unpredictable from the start. They didn't panic, they didn't freeze, and they didn't act like a primitive species meeting space travelers for the first time. The hologram shifted again, now showing another group of explorers testing the humans' problem-solving abilities. They left a piece of advanced equipment on a riverbank to see how the locals would react. The humans approached it carefully, studied it, then took it apart in ways that shocked the observers. Without tools, without training, they figured out how it worked enough to guess its purpose. They didn't fear it, they understood it. That part of the footage made the council members visibly tense. Understanding technology you've never seen before wasn't normal. The archivist glanced around, noticing how many of them seemed uncomfortable. The speaker whispered that the old reports called humans adaptation-driven. They learned by instinct. They saw patterns quickly. They didn't follow expected behavior charts. No matter how many times early galactic scientists tested them, humans responded in ways the predictions failed to catch. The footage moved to another scene, one that made the entire chamber lean forward. A sudden storm struck the explorers' landing site. Heavy winds and lightning came out of nowhere, catching the team unprepared. Their equipment malfunctioned. One of their shelters collapsed. The humans from a nearby village rushed toward them without hesitation. They didn't understand alien technology, but they understood danger, teamwork, and crisis. They pulled the explorers to safety, covered them with their own supplies, and worked quickly to rebuild the damaged shelter. They didn't run. They didn't freeze. They acted. One council member rubbed his forehead and said this was the moment the old explorers realized they had misjudged the species. Humans reacted to chaos with a type of determination many advanced species struggled with. Their survival instincts were different, sharp, flexible, fast. The old reports described humans as being able to switch paths instantly, turning fear into action with unusual speed. The hologram cut to another clip, this time showing a human crafting a tool from pieces of broken equipment left behind by the explorers. He didn't copy it. He improved it. The explorer's notes described him as alarming in creativity, someone who could turn one idea into 10 new ones without hesitation. The archivist watched the hologram, slowly understanding the reason behind the ancient lock. Humans were not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they were unpredictable, adaptable, and fast thinkers. The next recorded event was more serious. The explorers attempted a controlled experiment, showing a holographic creature to the humans to test their emotional reactions. The creature in the projection roared loudly, meant to look threatening. Most species reacted with fear in this scenario, but the humans in the recording did something different. They stepped forward, ready to defend each other. They didn't know the threat wasn't real. They didn't care. They acted as a group, moving with strong protective instincts. The elders watching the footage shifted uncomfortably. One explained that this was the moment the ancient researchers realized humanity didn't need advanced weapons to be a threat. Their intelligence, unity, and courage made them unpredictable even without technology. The hologram shook again. Switching to a later expedition, the footage showed humans who had already started copying the explorers' tools. Their inventions were still simple, but they were built fast. Too fast. The reports noted that humans were learning from every small interaction, absorbing information like sponges. Their creativity had no pause button. One senior council member, usually calm, finally spoke. He said this rapid progress was what scared the old empires the most. A species that advanced slowly could be monitored. A species that advanced steadily could be guided. But a species that advanced unpredictably, that was another story. The hologram dimmed, briefly before showing the moment. Everything changed. One of the explorers tried to interfere with a human settlement, not violently, but with arrogance. He believed he could push the humans back, show superiority. Instead, the humans responded in a way that blew apart every prediction model. They organized instantly, not to attack, but to defend. They didn't rely on a leader. They didn't collapse into confusion. They worked together like a single mind, forming plans on the spot, coordinating movement, using simple resources with stunning efficiency. The explorers retreated. The humans didn't chase them. They simply held their ground with calm confidence, as if telling the galaxy, "We do not start fights, but we will end them." The chamber temperature seemed to drop. Even the archivist felt a chill watching the scene. The human's behavior wasn't aggressive, but it was powerful, in a way that made fear feel like the only logical response. The footage continued, showing the fallout. The explorers returned home shaken. They reported that humanity wasn't simply strong. Humanity broke the rules of analysis. Every model used to predict species development failed. Every behavior chart fell apart. Every attempt to place humans in a standard category collapsed. The old galactic leaders didn't know how to respond to something that didn't follow the rules. They couldn't classify humans as peaceful or hostile, primitive or advanced, slow or fast. Humans were everything at once, changing from moment to moment. So they made a decision, a fearful one. They locked the planet's true name away. They sealed all records. They banned any contact. They placed Earth under a rule so strict that even speaking its name triggered alarms. The galaxy wasn't hiding the planet to protect themselves from humans. They were hiding the planet because they feared what would happen if humanity ever re-entered galactic affairs with the same unpredictable brilliance they showed in the old recordings. As the footage ended, the holograms faded and the chamber fell silent. The archivist looked around at the faces of the council members. Some looked pale. Some looked angry. Some looked like they finally understood a truth they wished had stayed buried. The speaker slowly exhaled, staring at the empty space where the holograms had been. He said that the forgotten history had resurfaced for a reason. Humans were never destroyed, never lost, never erased. They were simply unseen, quiet, evolving on their own, becoming stronger in ways the old explorers could never predict. The archivist whispered a question. What if they heard their name again? No one answered. The silence was louder than any alarm. The truth was simple. If humans heard the call, the galaxy would soon learn what they had become. The chamber remained silent long after the holograms faded. The old footage had shaken every council member. Even those who had never heard the stories could feel the truth pressing against their thoughts. Humans were not like any other species the galaxy had recorded. They were different in a way that was hard to explain, but impossible to ignore. The archivist stood near the console, unsure if he should speak or stay quiet. He opened a file thinking he had found a simple mistake. Instead, he had awakened something that generations before him worked hard to hide. The weight of that reality pressed into the air like an invisible storm. Then the alarm blared. Not the normal alarm used for station issues or small emergencies. This one was deeper, older, more serious. It came from the outer edges of the council's communication grid, something that shouldn't even be active anymore. The elders in the room reacted instantly. Their eyes widened. Their posture changed. A few stood up with sudden fear. The speaker ordered the holograms to be transferred to the central screen. As the system responded, a massive map of the galaxy appeared, glowing in soft blue light. Dots representing old beacons and relay points blinked across the map. But one of them, one very far from the council's region, was pulsing in bright red. The archivist didn't understand. He pointed to the light and asked what it meant. One of the elders answered with a voice that carried decades of buried fear. That beacon should not be active. The archivist frowned. He asked why a single beacon mattered. The elder explained that it wasn't just any beacon. It was an ancient Terran relay, a device created during the old explorers' encounters with humans. It wasn't built by humans. It was built by the explorers themselves. They left it near Earth to monitor the planet from a distance. After the treaty to never interfere with Earth was made, the beacon was shut down and buried under layers of restrictions. It was never supposed to turn on again, unless the planet's true name was spoken. The speaker looked at the archivist with a mix of worry and disbelief. The archivist felt his chest tighten. He whispered that he didn't know saying a name could do that. He didn't know old systems were still connected. He didn't know anything about the galaxy's forgotten pact. The speaker replied that none of them should have known. That was the whole point of sealing the records, to prevent anyone from accidentally waking the sleeping link. The galaxy map flickered again. More red lights appeared, one after another, like falling dominoes. Relay stations near the edge of uncharted space. Ancient scanners buried on old moons. Deep space listening posts that hadn't been touched in centuries. All were coming online. The archivist's voice was barely a whisper when he asked, "Does this mean they heard?" No one responded at first. The silence felt like the entire chamber was holding its breath. Then the speaker finally confirmed what everyone was afraid to say aloud. Something heard. The speaker didn't say humans directly. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew exactly what the ancient systems were reacting to. The true name of the planet had been spoken with the authority of the council. The galaxy's network recognized that speech as a signal, a call. And now, something at the far end of space had answered. The archivist felt his heartbeat racing as the red lights continued spreading. The council members watched in tense silence. Each activation meant the same thing. A signal was moving through space, waking everything connected to Earth's old surveillance network. One council member, usually calm and logical, said something that made the room colder. If the relays are waking up, then they are tracking movement. Movement. The word felt heavy. The archivist asked what kind of movement. No one had an exact answer, but the system soon provided one. The map zoomed in on a distant region near the old Terran zone. The screen displayed numbers and coordinates, energy signatures, distortions in subspace. Something was leaving the region, not randomly, not slowly, but in a straight path directly toward the council's sector. The archivist took a step back. He whispered, "Are they coming here?" The speaker didn't deny it. He simply stared at the readings and said the galaxy might be facing a return of a species it had intentionally avoided for ages. A species that adapted faster than predictions. A species that learned faster than analysis. A species that responded to danger with unity and strength. Humans. Not ancient. Not forgotten. Not extinct. Just silent. And now, maybe not silent anymore. The council moved quickly. Orders were sent across the capital. Defense grids were activated. Communication lines were restricted. But the elders in the chamber knew none of it mattered. The old records made it clear. Humanity was not a species you could prepare for in a traditional way. They didn't attack blindly. They didn't act without thought. They didn't move without intention. If they were coming, it meant they had a purpose. The speaker asked the archivist if the system said anything else when the file opened. The archivist hesitated. Then he remembered the repeating message that flashed earlier. Identity protocol. Activated. One elder explained that this message meant the contact was not accidental. The old Terran relay was designed to wake only when Earth's true name was spoken with official authority. The system assumed the galaxy wanted contact with humanity again, a contact that had been forbidden for countless years. Another council member asked how humans could detect something from so far away, especially if the old relay was ancient and weak. The elders simply looked at one another. They didn't know how far human technology had progressed during their isolation. The last time the galaxy had seen humanity, they were already learning at a speed that frightened advanced species. If humans had evolved beyond that, no one could predict what they were capable of now. The map displayed a new reading, a long streak of energy moving through subspace. It was enormous, far bigger than any ship the council used. The archivist stared at the reading, confused. He wondered if it was some kind of natural phenomenon, but the system labeled it clearly. Man-made object detected. Velocity, unknown. Purpose, unknown. The council chamber erupted into low whispers and nervous discussions. Some believed humanity was coming peacefully. Others believed the humans might think the galaxy wanted war. No one really knew how humans would respond after so many centuries of silence. The speaker called for quiet. He reminded everyone that humans in the old footage were not aggressive without reason. They defended, protected, adapted, but they didn't start conflicts. He warned them not to panic, but the tension in his voice showed he was struggling with fear too. Another scan came through. The object leaving the Terran zone wasn't alone anymore. Smaller signals followed it. A formation, organized, coordinated. This wasn't a random launch. This was intentional movement. The archivist whispered that he wished he had never touched the file, that he didn't mean to wake anything. The speaker placed a hand on his shoulder, telling him that the truth was bound to surface eventually. Nothing stays buried forever, not even an entire species. The map zoomed out again. The red trail of movement grew longer. The readings grew clearer. Whatever was coming was traveling faster than anything the council had ever seen. The speaker finally said what everyone was thinking, even if they didn't want to hear it. If the humans really heard us, then they are already on their way. The archivist felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Who were humans now? Had they changed? Had they grown stronger? Had they become something the galaxy couldn't imagine? The chamber lights dimmed again as the sensors detected another surge. Object had accelerated. They were coming faster, all because one name, one forgotten name, had been spoken inside a quiet council chamber on an ordinary day. The galaxy had awakened. Something ancient. And whatever it was heading straight toward them. The atmosphere inside the council chamber felt different now. It was no longer just tense. It felt heavy, like the entire room understood something dangerous had already begun. The map in front of them continued to update, showing the movement coming from the edge of the galaxy. The signals were growing clearer, stronger, and faster. The archivist stood near the console, trying to steady his breathing. He watched lines of data move across the screen, and with each new reading, his stomach sank a bit more. It was strange. He had never seen humans before. He had never even read much about them. Yet now, he felt as if he had dragged something ancient out of the dark. He whispered that maybe the system was wrong. Maybe the signals weren't human. Maybe it was an asteroid trail or an unknown energy storm. Anything would be better than the idea that a forgotten species had suddenly awakened. But the speaker shook his head. The patterns were too organized. The speed was too stable. And the path was too direct. Whatever was coming wasn't wandering. It was heading straight for the council. Another council member tried to calm the room by saying that humans might not be coming for war. Maybe they simply wanted to understand why their name was called. Maybe they were responding peacefully. But even as he said it, his voice didn't sound confident. The unknown was always frightening, and with humans, the unknown was bigger than usual. One of the elders approached the map. He stared at the glowing streak of energy for a long time before speaking. He said that humans in the old records never ignored danger. They faced it head on, no matter the risk. If they believed someone called them, they would investigate. If they sensed a threat, they would confront it. If they felt curiosity, they would follow it. And if they believed someone was afraid of them, they would try to understand why. The archivist listened carefully. Something struck him as strange. He asked the council why they feared humans so deeply when most of the old footage showed humans acting bravely, protecting others, and showing compassion. There were no scenes of mindless destruction, no evidence of cruelty. The humans were fierce, yes, but they were not reckless. The elders exchanged looks, unsure who should answer. Finally, the speaker spoke with slow, measured words. We did not fear their cruelty. We feared their potential. The archivist frowned. The speaker explained further. Humans advanced faster than any species the galaxy had encountered. Their minds adapted instantly. Their emotions were powerful. Their creativity was unpredictable. And their unity during danger made them nearly impossible to manipulate or control. It wasn't that humans were violent. It was that humans could become anything. The archivist lowered his gaze. He understood now. It wasn't humans themselves that the galaxy feared. It was what humans could grow into. A new alert blinked on the console. The archivist opened it immediately. His eyes widened. The object traveling through space had changed its formation. Smaller signals had moved around it, forming a pattern that looked like a protective barrier. The system identified it as a defensive posture. Whoever was traveling was prepared for possible hostility. The speaker asked the system to measure the distance again. The object was still far, but traveling so fast, the predictions became harder. It could arrive sooner than expected. Days instead of cycles. Hours instead of days, if it accelerated again. The council began to argue softly. Some wanted to send a message to the incoming travelers. Others wanted to hide all records and pretend nothing had happened. A few suggested activating old weapons, even though they knew it wouldn't matter. The archivist felt lost in the middle of all this. He had never seen the council so confused, so unsure. They were leaders of the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Yet now they were arguing like scared citizens. Then another message flashed on the screen. Deep space. Listening post 17 activated. Terran signal detected. Language unknown. The archivist stiffened. That post was ancient, older than the council building itself. It was built during the last contact with humans. It had one purpose, to listen for them. And it had heard something. The speaker asked the system to play the signal. But the system hesitated. It displayed a message saying the audio was too damaged, too unclear. The archivist adjusted the settings, trying again. Static filled the room. Broken sounds leaked through. Faint tones, short bursts, almost like speech but distorted by distance. One of the elders leaned closer, eyes narrowing. He said the pattern felt familiar. Not a threat. Not a weapon. It was more like a test signal. Someone was checking the channel. Someone was trying to speak, but didn't know if anyone was listening. The archivist felt warmth rise in his chest. If they were trying to speak, maybe they weren't angry. Maybe they weren't coming for war at all. Maybe they just wanted to understand. The speaker, however, wasn't convinced. He reminded the room that humans often communicated in many layers. Their words, emotions, and intentions mixed together in ways that other species struggled to decode. A friendly greeting could sound like a battle cry to someone who didn't understand. A warning could sound like an invitation. And a simple test signal might hide something far more complex. The archivist asked quietly if they should respond. The room grew still. Everyone knew the risk. Replying could calm the situation or make it worse. Staying silent could prevent misunderstanding or insult the approaching traveler's dot. Before they decided, the map updated again. The large object approaching suddenly slowed down. Not stopped, but slowed, like it was observing something. The smaller signals around it shifted positions, spreading out like scouts. The speaker breathed out softly. "They are looking at us?" The archivist didn't understand how that was possible from so far away. But one council member explained that humans were known for doing impossible things. Even early humans found ways to scan, observe, and analyze without the tools galactic species needed. Now, after centuries of growth, who knew what they could do? A chilling thought crossed the archivist's mind. What if they already know we spoke their name? The speaker didn't answer, but the look on his face was enough. The galaxy's silence had been broken. Humans were no longer hidden behind old restrictions. The ancient systems had woken them. And whatever they were now, explorers, warriors, travelers, or something entirely new, they were coming, and they were aware. The council finally agreed to send a small, neutral message. A simple signal. No words. Just a soft pulse of light meant to show peaceful intent. The archivist sent it through the console, watching it disappear into the dark space beyond the capital world. Then the room waited. Every second felt long. The archivist imagined the pulse traveling through the stars, reaching the unknown travelers. Being analyzed by minds, the galaxy had not met in centuries. He wondered how humans would react. Would they see it as peace? As fear? As a mistake? A new alert flashed. The council rushed to the map. The approaching object had changed its course slightly. Not away. Not sideways. Closer. Directly toward the capital. And then, for the first time since the ancient files opened, the incoming travelers responded. A single message arrived. Clear. Strong. Purposeful. Not in a known language, but with a pattern that felt unmistakably human. Firm, calm, confident. They had heard the call. They were coming, and they wanted to speak. The council hall stayed silent long after the humans stepped inside. Even though the visitors stood calmly at the center of the chamber, every council member felt an old fear crawling back into their mind. They had listened to countless species speak across these floors, but something about the humans made the air feel heavier, like the moment before a storm. The chamber lights were bright and steady, yet many felt as if shadows were stretching longer than usual. The first human spoke again, slowly, as if choosing each word with care. He said they came because their world's true name had been spoken in the council hall, and that name was locked away for a reason. The moment it had been activated, a signal reached Earth through an old network, one that the galaxy had forgotten, but humans had not. The council listened with stiff shoulders. No one dared interrupt. The man explained that many ages ago, when the galaxy was young and many empires were still forming, Earth had met several of those rising powers. At the time, humans were not as advanced as they were now, but they already had something that confused other species. They adapted too fast, learned too fast, changed too fast. Empires tried to predict them and failed. Some tried to control them and regretted it. The council had heard a little of this history from the archives, but hearing it from humans themselves made their stomachs twist. The visitor continued, saying there were conflicts, misunderstandings, and moments when things nearly spiraled into large-scale wars. But eventually, a treaty had been made. The galaxy agreed to leave Earth alone, to avoid using Earth's true ancient name, and to never interfere unless invited. Humans agreed to the same. It was a peace built not on fear, he said, but on understanding. For a long time, both sides respected the pact. Earth withdrew from the wider galaxy and focused on its own growth. The rest of the galaxy moved forward with its own progress. The council members felt uneasy as the man spoke. The treaty sounded simple, yet the consequences of breaking it were clearly not simple at all. The second human took a step forward, and her voice was softer, gentler. She explained that humans had not come to punish anyone. They were not here to threaten, demand resources, or claim power. They came because the world had changed, and the galaxy was facing problems that could not be solved with old fears and old secrets. She said Earth knew about the instability growing in several star systems, the conflicts rising between younger species, the loss of old roots, and the failing networks that once kept worlds connected. Many council members shifted nervously. They had been hiding those problems from each other for years, hoping no one would notice. The fact that humans, who had stayed silent for so long, already knew every detail made their hearts pound. The woman explained that Earth wanted to help. Not as rulers, not as commanders, but as allies. Humans had advanced in ways that the galaxy had not expected. They had solved resource shortages, healed their environments, and built new ways of travel that didn't tear space apart. They had learned to handle conflicts not with force, but with strategy, patience, and discipline. The council members didn't know whether to be relieved or more terrified. One of the elders finally gathered the courage to speak. His voice shook slightly as he asked why Earth would want to help them now. Why come forward after hiding for so long? Why trust the same council that had forgotten their pact and broken it? The first human answered gently. He said Earth never hated the galaxy. They never held a grudge. They simply needed time to grow, to understand themselves, and to build a stable future. For centuries they had watched from far away, learning quietly, preparing quietly, improving quietly. They had kept an eye on the stars, not because they feared the galaxy, but because they didn't want past mistakes to repeat. He said that hearing their world's true names spoken aloud wasn't an insult. It was a signal, a reminder that the time of silence had ended. The galaxy had entered a new era, and it needed cooperation more than separation. Still, the council remained tense. They were used to alliances formed out of fear or advantage. They had never experienced a species offering help without asking for anything in return. It felt strange, almost unreal. Another council member asked what Earth wanted from the treaty. The answer came quickly. Nothing more than honesty, respect, and a chance to work together. Earth wanted to share its knowledge, stabilize the fragile systems, repair old networks, and protect the galaxy from falling into chaos. The humans admitted they could not fix everything alone. But they also said the council could not fix everything alone either. The only way forward was unity. The room stayed quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence this time. Not fear, not shock. Something else, something like hope, mixed with caution. The humans continued speaking, describing a way for species to share knowledge without risking domination. They explained systems for peacekeeping that didn't rely on weapons, but instead on negotiation and rapid response teams. They described technology that allowed distant worlds to speak instantly, safely, and clearly. They mentioned a power source that produced no waste and no danger, enough to fuel entire planets without harm. Each detail made the council feel more humbled. They had spent centuries arguing over limited energy supplies, slow communication lines, and small territorial disputes. Meanwhile, Earth had solved issues they didn't even know had solutions. At last, the humans offered a formal alliance agreement. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a request. It was an invitation. They placed the document on a floating panel in the center of the hall. The panel displayed simple terms: cooperation, peaceful exchange, and shared protection. Nothing hidden. No traps. The council sat frozen. They had expected threats or impossible conditions. Instead, the humans had given them clarity and a path forward. One of the younger council members felt overwhelmed. She asked them gently why the old archives had shown humans as unpredictable and dangerous. Why were ancient empires so afraid? The second human smiled, a small, warm smile. She said ancient species feared not because humans wanted to harm them, but because humans were different from every model they had ever studied. Humans grew fastest under pressure, adapted when situations changed, and made decisions that could not be predicted by normal logic. They were emotional, creative, stubborn, and always willing to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves. That combination scared older civilizations who believed everything must follow rules and calculations. But unpredictable does not mean dangerous, the woman added. It simply means alive. The words echoed across the chamber. Some members lowered their heads, feeling foolish for building so much fear around a species that now stood calmly before them. The humans said they would give the council time to think. The alliance did not need to be accepted immediately. They only asked that the council not hide their decision. Whatever choice they made, humans would respect it. The humans bowed politely, a gesture the galaxy had rarely seen. They turned and walked back toward their colossal ship waiting beyond the hall's entrance. Their steps were steady and unhurried, like they had all the time in the universe. When the doors closed behind them, the chamber felt lighter, yet strangely more serious. Some council members whispered to each other, some remained speechless, and some stared at the alliance panel without blinking. One of the oldest elders finally spoke. He said the galaxy had always believed strength came from the size of one's fleet or the power of one's technology. But today, humans showed a different kind of strength. The strength to forgive. The strength to offer help. The strength to stand without fear or anger. He said that perhaps this was why Earth's true name was sealed away. Not because humans were a danger, but because the galaxy was not ready to understand them. Maybe now the galaxy was finally ready. The council debated for a long time. Some argued that trusting humans was risky. Others said not trusting them was far more dangerous. Slowly, the room shifted toward agreement. They needed Earth, not as rulers, but as partners. Hours later, as the humans prepared to leave orbit, a signal reached their ship. The council had accepted the beginning of the alliance. Not all terms were finalized, but the door was open. The first step was taken. The humans replied with a message short, polite, and warm. They said they were ready to build the future together. For the first time in ages, the galaxy felt like it might change for the better. Not because of fear, not because of war, but because Earth had returned, not as a threat, but as a guide. And as the council members watched the human vessel drift away, they understood something important. Panic had ended. Confusion had ended. A new chapter had begun. One spoken name had changed everything, and the galaxy would never forget it.